Hi everyone, welcome back to Wise Words Wednesday. We finally got some sun and a break from the snow and blizzard conditions here in New York. So thank you for joining me on this next edition of what I think is a really incredibly important topic, and that is vendor accountability. So for those of you that are starting off or may have already engaged in years of development and launching your own line, you're faced with this eternal conversation with yourself, which is, if the factory consistently is falling off spec and not delivering what I had asked for, then what is my right as a buyer and as someone that has been purchasing goods and materials from these vendors season after season? And so it's an interesting conversation. I think it varies in each part of the world. For example, in the US, when you're dealing in the local manufacturing region, garment makers here are very a la carte. So it's just maybe sewing. Some of them might not even have a cutting facility. So if the cutting facility is down the street and a totally different entity than the sewing factory, sometimes when the cut work comes back, it's actually out of tolerance or out of spec. You know, when you're laying goods out for samples and laying goods out for production, it's two different processes. For sampling, you're just cutting individual piece by piece, but when you're cutting production, you're actually stacking. So they're laying out the fabric, they're stacking it like a nice corned beef sandwich, and they cut through it with a very big electrical device, or it's laser cut, depending on the level of capabilities of that facility. That being said, the garment maker, who is just your labor source, really has nothing to do with your cutting source. And so you've got two dueling vendors that are potentially going to battle each other out based on someone not being able to hit your specs. And so it's kind of a longer conversation than just this little tidbit, and I'm happy to talk about it more at length at a future date, but I wanted to hone in on one of the most important things that you can do to combat any of those problems from happening ultimately, and to hold your vendors accountable. Number one, try whenever possible to work where there is as much vertical integration as possible. So if you can avoid working with a garment maker that doesn't do their own cutting, I would highly recommend that. So as the garment maker and they're cutting your goods, they're also working hand in hand. The sewers are working hand in hand with the cutters to ensure that the pattern pieces are being maintained and followed. Listen, it is a sleight of hand. Someone might cut outside of the circle, someone might cut inside of the circle. And what that means potentially is an armhole that is cut too short, which then affects the entire fit of your constructed blazer. That's an expensive mistake, and it's very hard to make up for that once the goods have been cut. What I like to impart to anyone who's starting off or working with us is that they establish and we build a foul-proof tech pack. And one of the most important pages of the tech pack isn't just your sketch, your detailed stitch drawings, your inside view, how to construct the waistband, because it is a pictorial of how you want your ultimate product built. But there are, in this case, 25 points of measure, POMs, that are all the map and the guideline for the garment factory to follow when they are developing your pattern. So if my waist circumference has a certain flat measurement, then my pattern maker has to establish that in his or her pattern. And that needs to be maintained. At that point, it then gets maintained in the cutting process. So you understand, if the factory is only working off of a pattern and they're cutting and sewing each season, there's nobody maintaining the specs. So you have to come in with your architectural drawing so that you can police the measurements from each of your vendors so that there are no question marks about what you are expecting when they are ultimately finished with your goods. So again, this is a very long conversation. I wanted to touch upon it because it's very important to all of you that you feel like you're well taken care of, but that the vendors are partnering with you in a way that they should be, and that it is their responsibility to maintain your spec, just as it is your responsibility to maintain the speed limit when you're on the highway. And the cops are on the side of the road watching that. And so that's what these specs are. They are the unofficial police officer, along with our tech designer, to maintain the specs and to ensure that the vendors are accountable for the finished product, the finished dimensions, and the finished requested specs. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you found it to be informative. As always, please reach out to us at www.fabrictofinish.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at Fabric to Finish and on TikTok. Have a wonderful day.